right, guys, getting right into this repair for this P0335 DTC. We can see here in the schematic diagram for this guy, the sensor's just got 3 connections. It's got a ground, it's got the signal, and it's got a voltage reference, a 5-volt voltage reference that's coming from the PCM. And it's sending a signal out to the PCM. And of course, it gets its ground sensor signal from the PCM. So what we're going to do is first identify what we're looking for, where it is, and I'll show you both in here, and then we'll look at it actually on the engine, and then we'll get to going about testing it. So as far as what it looks like, if we go back a little bit in the manual here, and we take a look about the crankcase position sensor, it's telling us that it's located on the side of the engine, on the driver's side in the front. So this is the harmonic balancer attached to the crankshaft. It's going to be attached right about there. You're not going to be able to see it because the power steering pump is going to be blocking your view from the front, but I'll show you how you can get an angle to see it. All right, and then when we actually get to it, we're going to be looking at a 3-prong connector, and this is going to correspond back to what we saw in the schematic. So if I just hold that page and I pull out the new one I've got. So it's a GM 125 57046, or it might also be sold as a Delco 213 337. This is a brand new fresh stock one. There's of course earlier numbers that are superseded that'll work, but this is the latest number. And this is what this diesel crankshaft position sensor looks like. So here's our 3-position connector that we are seeing shown here. And then here's the sensor itself, and it installs in the engine like this. There's an O-ring here, and it's held on by a single bolt to the block. So that's what we're looking for. Now let me show you it on the actual engine here. Put some of this stuff away. I'm going to come back in a moment. All right, let's first find out where the harness connects. So you're up in the top of the engine area here. You pull some of these wire looms out of the way. You'll find the harness connection for the crankshaft position sensor is right here. So this is the piece coming up from the sensor, and this is the harness it connects into that's going to the PCM. So that's the first reference point, and that's one of the first things we're going to do is reach in here and disconnect this so we can do some multimeter checks. But let me go show you where it's attached to the engine underneath now. All right, guys, we're underneath the truck here, and you can see we're right near the pitman arm. And right next to the power steering pump, looking up here from the bottom, if we zoom in here a little bit, we can see the bolt. And there's a lot of old oil crud on here, but you can see the bolt that's holding on the crankcase position sensor and the harness going into it. So that's where it's located, looking up from the bottom. All right, guys, the first thing we're going to need to do is take our turbo power shroud off. It'll give us a little bit easier access to the wiring harness. So we're just going to take these 4 10-millimeter bolts, loosen them up, and it comes right off. Set that aside. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get a flashlight over here for you guys. We're going to pull this harness out where we can access it. And then the whole reason we're doing that is because when we take a look where we were in the service manual, and we take a look at some of the steps we're going to be needing to do, one of the things we're going to need to do is come over here, disconnect this sensor, and we're going to probe the voltage of the reference voltage rather from 4.8 to 5.2 volts would be the okay range. We're going to do that from the reference line coming from the PCM to chassis ground, and then we're going to do it again from the ground line to the battery positive voltage. And this is basically going to confirm that our harness is okay before we do all the work to take this sensor out. This is going to be a lot of work to remove this particular sensor, so we don't want to bother with it if the problem is more in the wiring harness going to the sensor rather than the sensor itself. So let me get a couple of extra tools in my multimeter and we'll get started on this test. Go. All right, here's what we've got set up for these 2 tests from the service manual, guys. I've got a test light hooked up to one of the positive battery terminals, and we're going to use this to check that we have a good connection to the ground going to the PCM. And then we've got the negative terminal on our voltmeter hooked up to this other battery. And we're going to be using this to probe that the 5-volt reference voltage is okay. So hopefully you guys will be able to see in here. I'm going to do the 5-volt reference voltage first. So we've disconnected. I've already disconnected the... it's really difficult to find anything to get the flashlight on because everything's aluminum on this truck. I've already disconnected the sensor connector. And so what we're after is this guy down here, which is the harness that it plugs into. It's got kind of like a purple insulation around it. And when you're looking at it, the middle pin is going to be the ground pin. And then the pin that we're after to do the check is the one on the left. With the one on the other opposite side is actually the signal coming from the sensor. And so what they're giving you in the service manual is they're giving you the view of this guy, ABC. And of course that's the male end, and we're going to be testing the female end. So let me see if I can get any better on this lighting here for you guys. Maybe something like this maybe. Let's see how that looks. See if we can zoom in on that. Yeah, that's a little better. So let me see if we can just find a place where we can get this flashlight to stay with that zoomed in view. Maybe just like that. That's probably as good as I'm going to be able to get it, guys. All right, so I'm not going to be able to show you that voltmeter and this, so we're going to have to, kind of pan out anyway. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this voltmeter test to the reference ground. So what we're interested in watching is what voltage that we get read off of the meter here. So I'm just using this screwdriver to give me something to have some leverage on so I can push against this connector to get good contact on that end pin, that reference voltage pin. All right, so we're getting, if I could just get a better push on it. Just doesn't want to stay put. All right, so we're getting nothing right now except 1.2 millivolts. Now what we want to do, that's what we want. So we just shouldn't have anything on here unless we turn the key to the the on position or the run position. We don't actually have to try and crank the engine or start it. We just need to turn it to where the lights on the dash come on. So I'm going to go do that, and then we'll come back and repeat this test, and we should be getting a reading in the range that the service manual indicated. All right, as soon as I turn this on, you're going to hear the glow plug relay go off. And then we'll come back up here and we'll repeat that same test. And this time, we should get the reference voltage. So again, I'm just using the screwdriver to give myself some leverage. And now I can see we're reading 5.1, 5.4. That fluctuation is just, me wobbling a little bit here. Plus we had the glow plug relay going off. So 5.09 voltage, we're within the specification. So we are getting the appropriate voltage from the PCM over to the sensor. So the next test is whether or not we've got a good ground connection. So we're going to take our test light and we're going to hit that middle pin, and you see we got a light. So we are supplying good ground and good voltage to the sensor, so I don't have to go worry about looking at all this wiring all the way back to the PCM. So I guess we'll go ahead and proceed with the job of actually removing this guy. So it's it's not that bad. I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, but what I'm going to have to do on this truck, you're going to have to, in all trucks, you're going to have to take the serpentine belt off. I'm going to have to pull this alternator because this is a double alternator vehicle. There's one here and there's one there. We're going to get this one out of the way. We're going to pull off this idler pulley plate. What we're really after is the power steering pump. So in all trucks, what we're trying to do is we're not going to disconnect any of the hoses. We're just going to get the pump pushed off to the side so we have a good clear shot at that sensor, because it is notorious for breaking off or getting stuck. So you don't want to try and come up from the bottom. I think it'll be pretty futile. All right, so I'm going to get set up to do that. I'm going to take this serpentine belt off first. all I'm going to do that, I'll show that because I got the tool handy. I'm just going to take a kind of a crowbar tool, and I've wrapped it with some paper towels just so that I don't damage anything. Still hunting for something magnetic here for the flashlight. Everything's aluminum. Never can get this guy where I want him. There he goes. I should pry him up, be able to get the belt off. And I just use this so I don't get any scratches or mars on the pulley itself. All right, next thing I'm going to do, I'm not necessarily going to show this because this is really not pertinent to the video, but I'm going to remove this alternator and I'm going to remove this mounting plate for this idler pulley, and we'll come back when it's time to remove the power steering pump. All right, here's where we're at. We've got the alternator off and two 15mm bolts that come out of here, and then the plate in this particular option for the idler pulley, because of the second alternator, there's an additional two 15mm bolts that we've got out of the way. So now we've got this thing closer to what most of you guys probably are seeing. So here's our power steering pump. There's our harness that we can just catch a glimpse of going to our crankshaft position sensor right back there. So we still got to get this guy off. One of the bolts is behind this pulley, so we're going to have to get a pulley puller on here and remove it. And so that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'll show you that, right towards the end, just so you can get an idea for how the tool works. And once we remove this pulley off the pump, then we'll be able to get to this bolt and this bolt in the back, and we should be able to get this guy out of the way so we can go in there and get that sensor. All right, guys, to have enough room to get a pulley puller in here to get the power steering pump pulley off, we're going to have to take the upper fan shroud off. So we're going to go around and gently open up these battery retainer clips. Emphasis on gently because they're going to be super old and you don't want them to break. But if you do it gently like I'm doing here with a small flathead screwdriver, they'll come off. What it is it's got a little notch here that gets caught inside that one. So by putting this in here and twisting it, you're releasing it. There are three 10mm bolts holding it on the outside. And then on the inside, at either corner, there's another 10mm bolt that you'll have to take off. And then there's one more of these little clips, like the one for the battery. This one is holding this vent. We just want to get him off too. It's for the axle shaft. Four-wheel drive thing, I presume. All right, we'll set that over there. We'll take these 10mm out, and then this guy will come right out. We already got our puller on here, so as soon as we get this guy out of the way, we can get a tool in there and start taking the pulley off. All right, guys, we're kind of losing the light here. I'm going to probably bring a halogen in here in a minute, but I got to get the fan out, and then we'll finally be able to pull this pulley. The way you get the fan out, at least on, this is a 99 6.5 liter, and there's some holes that you can see on the fan pulley. Hopefully you can see them. And they're in a pattern that matches this tool. And so this tool is going to go in there. This happens to be a Chevy product 61500B. I'll put a link to it in the description. This is what you use to get these kind of fans off. So this guy fits into the pulley like so, into those four holes. Just want to get him flush. And then you need something to go on this nut. Now, I've already pre-loosened this because otherwise it would take a helper. I'm going to see if I can find a place to put this light for you guys. I'm just going to use a really large crescent wrench that I'm going to fit inside here. If I can find a good angle to get it in there. There we go. And it's going to be lefty-loosey on the nut. I'm just going to turn like this. Now, obviously, you're going to need two people to break the torque on that, but that's all it takes to get this off. And then you can just proceed to unscrew the fan and the fan clutch assembly off of the water pump hub. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll come back. All right, guys, we got that pulley off. Just want to show you, we've removed it from the shaft, and now we have access to the bolts on either side of the pump, and we'll be able to move this guy out of the way and get access to that sensor. All this work just to get a hold of that sensor so that we can not have any trouble with it if it decides to break off. All right, and then let me show you a little bit about that pulley puller tool. So let me see if I can find a good spot to put the flashlight, maybe like this, and won't be a lot of glare. So the way this kind of a tool works is you've got a sleeve here that's holding this like clamshell on, and this clamshell is fitting into a groove that's made in, if we zoom in here a little bit, you can see this. It's made in here at the factory. And then also with this lip of this piece that this stud screws into. And on the other side, stud's got like a little kind of a round bullet in it so it doesn't damage the shaft. And then as you screw in this top piece and you hold this piece, it just pulls the pulley off the shaft with that lip. That's really all there is to it. So you can pick something up like this at Harbor Freight or something like that. If you think you need it, I'll leave a link in the description. All right, so it's getting kind of dark. Normally I just wrap this up, but way too dark to try and film this with the kind of flashlights I got available here. So we'll pick it up in the morning. All right, guys, we had to wait for the rain to stop this morning, as usual when you're trying to do something like this. So let's continue on. So to get the pump out, we're going to take these 3 13mm bolts off the front first that hold the pump to the bracket. You don't need to worry about this one down here because this one's just attaching a shield that protects this line. So we're going to pull those 3 out, and then we're going to come in and do the ones on the back. All right, guys, we got those 3 13mm off the front. Next guy we're going after is this 15mm nut on a stud right there on the back of the pump. So we're going to remove that one next. All right, guys, we've got this pump out and just pulled off enough so that we can get access to and see our crankcase position sensor finally. A couple of things I ended up, this nut ends up not helping because there's another one on the other side and you just can't get to it. So what I ended up doing is I took the 15mm bolt that holds this bracket right here to the block. So come up underneath this guy. So this is the easiest thing to do. And then to help it clear this cast iron mounting piece, I ended up taking off the 13 that holds this little shield that protects the pipe. And that gave me enough clearance to get it out. All right, so at this point, as you can see, this guy's got an awful lot of crud around him. And so what I'm first going to do is just kind of clean all this up so we can get a better view of it, and also so this stuff doesn't, end up accidentally getting pushed in when we put the new one in. So let me take a moment to do that, and then we'll be able to see and access this mounting nut, or excuse me, this mounting bolt over here, and we can remove it. All right, guys, before we pull this out, let's just refamiliarize ourselves with what we're doing here. So when we go down and look at it, now that I've cleaned it off, what you'll see is this view here. So it'll be the view where the harness goes into the sensor, and then there's this metal piece that is the mounting bracket, and then the bolt, there's a 13mm bolt that's holding it. What tends to happen on these is when you try to lift off on this piece, since it's just a very thin lip of this plastic holding it, it tends to break off with age. And so this piece just comes off and you're left with this guy sitting flush with the block. But it might not happen, but we did all this work because it probably will. So let's go ahead and head down where it is so that we can remove it. So you can see down here the 13mm bolt pretty clearly now. And you can see that mounting bracket now that I've cleaned off a lot of that crud that's been accumulated over time. So I'm going to see if I can get this 13 off now. There's not a whole lot of room in here, and you're not going to be able to see me wrench it off, but just find this somewhere where I can get enough of an angle to turn it. There we go. All right. Hopefully we can just spin this bolt off by hand. Yep. All right. So I should be able to go down here and get him off by hand. Sorry you can't actually see this. It's cramped, but there's our mounting bolt. All right. So now we've got the mounting bolt off. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of, see if I can get this. This flashlight has always got something to complain about. And plus, I don't want there to be too much glare where it's all whited out. So hopefully you guys can see that. What I'm going to try and do here is just wiggle this. Right? So can you see that wiggling? Do that again. So that's a good sign that this is wiggling. So that means it's kind of moving. Now what I'm going to try to do is gently go under here with a flathead screwdriver. See if I can just twist and get it to kind of move. And again, I'm going super, super patient here because I don't want this guy to break off. I'm hoping I get lucky. All right, it feels loose, so I'm going to come over on this side. I'm going to block your view for a minute. I'm going to try to give it a tug. All right, nope. So what tends to happen, I've read on the forums, is you tend to get some corrosion underneath here. Now if this breaks off, which I hope it doesn't, but if it does, it's not the end of the world. We can still get it out, but we're going to have to pull the timing cover off in order to access it. And right now what I think we're going to have the hard time, because I think why it's so loose is what I've got moving here is just the mounting bracket, and I think it has broke off. In fact, I'm pretty sure it has. Yep, so we've got the hard job. So you can see this is what happens. So the mounting bracket has broke off the old sensor, and now it's wedged into the block. So we're going to have to go do it the hard way. So what I'm going to do now is get ready to do that. And my plan on this, I kind of thought about it. My plan on this is, you see there's a raised edge here, and there's a raised here, these two bosses. My plan is to put a piece of metal across here, drill a hole in it, and thread a screw into the middle of this sensor and try to tighten it down. See if I can pull it out by doing that. So that's how we're going to attack it. So I really don't feel like pulling off the timing chain cover and yanking the water pump and everything else to do that job just to get this little sensor out. But I'm feeling more like this is the problem with that code, because it's the original sensor from '99, and I just barely wiggled it, and that piece broke off, so there's a good chance it's probably broke off internally as well. So let me get set up and we'll come back. All right, guys, the idea what we're going to do here is we're going to take the Dremel tool and we're going to drill a hole so that we can get this self-tapping lag screw or lag bolt into the sensor. And we're going to thread him in. Just grab some adjusting tool I had and put him on the drill press and put a hole here in the middle. And we're going to thread him in here, and we're going to rest this guy on those two bosses on the block. And as we tighten him up, my hope is that it'll pull the sensor out. And if this guy turns out to be too small, always start off small so that you can go to something bigger, and we'll try something bigger. So if we take a look down here at the sensor itself, so I'm going to be drilling right above the wiring. I'm decided I'm going to keep the wiring here so I have something to hold it while I drill, because I don't want it to go deeper into the engine, of course. So we'll put that hole right there, and then again we'll lay that tool between here and here, and hopefully that'll give us enough leverage to pull that guy out. So I'm going to go ahead and reposition the camera so you guys can get a better view, because my hand's going to be in here drilling. All right, guys, let's go ahead and start getting this hole drilled. All right, so it's plastic, so tried to use this variable Dremel to try and cut down on the RPMs so that we didn't melt the plastic. Another technique that you could do with this, I suppose, is you could take the screw and maybe heat it up before you try to put it in there. That's another approach that might work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can come down here and get this guy going inside the hole we just made. It'll stay there long enough for me to get my wrench. I'll try to do this with the camera here, but I might end up having to get everything started first and then come back. I don't know. Don't really have a lot of room to turn this. Sorry about that flashlight. This guy's always an unhappy camper. All right, but you can get the general idea here. I might have to get repositioned or to do what I need to do, but we're going to have this guy resting up against this piece of metal here. If I can get him to stay. Resting up against that piece of metal there, and then a piece on the bottom, and then we're going to tighten him up, and hopefully that's going to pull it out. Let me get this tightened up, and then we'll come back and film it coming out. All right, guys, the first screw ended up pulling out, but I put a bigger one in, and you can see we've got this guy pulled out, I don't know, like a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, and now that screw has given out. This stuff is just so old and brittle and fragmented. I'm only going to get one more shot at this, so I'm going to go to the next size up, and hopefully that does it. Otherwise, we're going to be disassembling the whole front to get the timing cover off in order to get this thing out. So let's see if we get lucky. All right, guys, we lucked out. The other bolt stripped and came out, but it came out this far, and I've been able to use these long-nose pliers to kind of inch it out a little bit at a time. So I think I'm going to be able to salvage this. I'm going to try to put a pair of vice grips on the end of this thing, and hopefully we will be able to grab it and pull it out. Not sure if I even get them in here. Still a very cramped fit. But you can see this thing just completely disintegrated. Nope, so I'm afraid I'll break it trying to get these on here. So I guess I'm just going to keep inching it out little bit by little bit like this until we can get it where we can actually pull it by hand. So I need to be kind of like where the camera is. So I'm just going to keep, well, actually, there it goes. There it goes. All right. So the most important thing you want to see when you pull one of these out is you don't want the end of the sensor to have any damage on it, because you don't want it to be hitting the crankshaft, reluctor wheel, or even the crankshaft itself. So no damage on the end, just completely disintegrated internally, plus us putting in the bolt didn't help it any. So now we'll clean this up and we'll install the new one. All right, guys, we've got this all cleaned off to put the new one in. If we take a look down below it, and we can see laying on top of this loom on the engine pump return line, we can see all of the pieces of this sensor that were just crumbling out as we tried to pull it. Kind of mixed in with all the oil and everything down here. All right, one of the other things I'm going to do before we install this is we're going to take a peek inside and make sure there's no crud inside this guy. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to show you inside here. So we're looking inside the bore of where this sensor goes, and we're just trying to make sure that we don't see any broken off chunks. Now we saw that the tip was not damaged. I just want to make sure that nothing fell in right as we pulled it out. I can see the piece of the crankshaft here that goes with that guy, so I don't really see any junk here. So I think we're good, and we can install the new one. All right, let's go get the new one and put it in. All right, guys, I'm going to give one more view inside of this thing, just because I realized I didn't have the light at the end of it cranked up all the way. All right, so we're going on the bore here. We're taking a close look at what the sensor gets triggered by. Again, I'm just looking for any damage. Just didn't have enough light the first time, I felt like, for you guys to really see in there. And there's a little bit of a this thing on the left, this little arc. I don't know if that's a piece of plastic or just maybe a little bit of oil. I might stick a rag in there just in case, to be sure. But I'm satisfied it's pretty clean. We'll just stick a rag in there and then we'll put the new sensor in. All right, guys, we're going to put the new one in. I'm just up here outside your view here. I'm putting a little bit of oil on that O-ring before I slide it in. I'm also going to slide some oil all along the side of the bore of this guy. We're just going to take him and fit him right inside there. All right, and then we're going to take our mounting bolt. Just get it started by hand, and then we'll get our wrench in here and we'll torque it down. Now, one other thing I want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and what I wanted to tie a string on the end of the other harness before it fell out, but I didn't get a chance to do that. And that's one of the things we're going to have to do is pull him out here. But one of the things I'm going to show you real quick on this guy, pull this off, make it a little easier to see. There's a tag from GM on the end of these harnesses. You can see here's our brand new one. And we've got a 207046, and our old one is also a 207046. So again, that's a good sign that we're putting on the same kind of part that we took off. So I'm going to get my torque wrench and we'll torque this guy down and we'll start the process of reassembly, and we'll all have a little brew to celebrate the fact that this thing didn't break off inside and we had to pull the timing cover to get it off. All right, so we'll come back when I get ready to do that. All right, guys, one thing I forgot to mention when we had the pump off, the power steering pump off, is you need to disconnect this guy to give yourself some slack for that EVO sensor that plugs in the back of the pump so that you don't put too much strain on this connection and maybe bust it. So I had that. You could see it maybe in the shot, but I didn't mention it. All right, so we've got the pump back in. That frame bolt and those 3 bolts in the front are all 37 foot-pounds as far as the torque goes to hold them up. And also, oh, by the way, the bolt that holds the crankshaft sensor is 18 foot-pounds. So we did an 18 foot-pound on the sensor bolt, and then we put the pump back in, and we did 37 foot-pounds on the frame bracket and the 3 in the front. And, I don't know if you guys probably don't have the same setup I do, but this idler pulley bracket, it's got 2 18 foot-pound torque bolts on it, and then, of course, these guys go 18 foot-pounds for the right-hand side, and left-hand side is tighter. It's 37 foot-pounds. And, of course, don't forget to put the connector back in and put the battery line back on the back. All right, our next step will be to put the pulley on the pump, so then we can put the serpentine belt back on, then the fan shroud, and get to where we can start the next thing. We're not done, on this. We still have to do what's called a top dead center offset adjustment because we changed this crankshaft position sensor. The other thing I'll show you up on top is get yourself something that you can fish out and run the connector up where it belongs in the same spot as the old one, right up here, because it's a very tight fit, so you want to have it route the same way. That's why I was trying not to take the old cable off. I was going to put a piece of fishing line or something so I could pull the new one up, but it fell through when it came off in there. Minor casualty, could have been a lot worse like we discussed earlier. So I've got this guy up here, and then when we get ready to connect this up, I reviewed last night's video and I can see that the flashlight kind of had too much glare on the test that we did over here on the pins. So before we connect it all up over here, I'll show you that again so you can get those connections down pat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the pulley on and the belt, and then we'll come back. All right, guys, we're just getting the pulley back on, and then we'll put the belt and the shroud, the fan rather, and then the shroud, and button all that up. And then I'll come back after all that's done, and we'll continue to hook this crankcase position sensor up and do the TDC offset relearn. All you really got to do with this piece here, same kit that you use to do the pulley removal is going to have the pieces to do a pulley install. I always find I need to shim this with a few washers though. And then when you get near the end where you're almost done, it's good to put a sleeve wrench on this pulley so that it won't turn on you as you try to do the last few turns, because it's going to be real tight near the end. But I got maybe an 1/8 of an inch left, and then we're done. So like I said, I'm not going to show any of this other stuff because the focus of this video is the crankshaft position sensor. So I'll get it all buttoned up, and we'll come back when we're ready to hook it up and finish adjusting it. All right, guys, I said I would give you a better shot of this connector just so you could see. So this is the middle pin is the B pin. This is what your reference ground was from that earlier test. And then your 5-volt reference is the one here on the left-hand side in reference to the clip on top. So at this point, we're getting ready to connect everything back up. We've got everything reassembled. And I'm just going to kind of, if we come out here, I'm just going to give a little bit of canned air on the connector here, just in case we picked any crud up on the way up. And this is the last thing we've got to do is hook this up. And then after that, we can reconnect the battery. We've had both negative terminals disconnected on the battery. So there's not a whole lot of room in here, as you can see. And I'm going to have to get a a little screwdriver under here, and I don't know how much of this you'll see, and I can tell right now I didn't bring one that was long enough. I'm going to have to get a longer one to push this connector together. But that's all you're going to do is hook this back up, and we'll come back after we've done that, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, guys, we've got this connector plugged back in. What I preferred to do here was to kind of grab it with a pair of long nose pliers and then take a flat punch and push the thing in until you hear it click. Fortunately, my hand's all in the way and there's nothing really to see. So, all right, at this point, the only thing we got left, if we pan back, we got to connect the negative terminal on the battery and re-energize it. I just prefer to make this connection without any power. And when we get that done, we'll be ready to start the relearn procedure. So just to show you one more time, so there's this view. So this picture is the view you see when you're looking at the connector to the sensor. And I was showing you the connector to the harness to the PCM. So it's the female view, and this is the male view. So you can see the B is the ground. The reference voltage in the picture I showed you was on the left, which is what this plugs into. And then, of course, A was on the right in that picture, and then you see it here on the left because this is the male end. All right, so after we go through this whole procedure, if we end up down at replacing the crankshaft position sensor, we then have to perform the TDC offset adjustment. That's required when you change this. And so if we take a look at that particular procedure, it's documented right here, and it says that this is only done when one of these repairs is performed. And of course, the one we've done is the crankshaft position sensor has been replaced. So what we're going to have to do for this procedure is we're going to have to, they tell you to have a scan tool, and I will have one, but you don't really have to have one for this unless you want to, know what it actually did. So if without a scan tool, you'll never know if it actually worked. But you install the scan tool, you start the engine, you let it heat up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you clear all the codes and turn the engine off. So I'm going to go ahead and start it up, let it heat up, clear those codes, and we'll come back when we get ready to start step 6. Go. All right, guys, we're on step 4 here. We currently got an engine coolant temperature of 174 degrees, which is greater than 170. So we're ready to go to the next step. And no check engine light, no service engine light soon. So we did not get our P0335 again, which is a good sign. In fact, we don't have any codes. So I'm just going to let this go up a little bit more, because if we review what we're about to do, I just don't want the temperature to go down and have to start all over again. So the next step after we clear the codes and turn the engine off, we're going to turn the ignition on just to get the lights on the dash to light up. We're not going to start the engine. Engine's off. And we're going to hold the pedal to the metal for 45 seconds. That's with the engine off. And this is a code to the PCM that we're going to do this top dead center offset adjustment procedure. And after those 45 seconds expire, we're going to turn the engine off for the key off for exactly 30 seconds. And in between that 45 seconds with the pedal down and ignition on, and that 30 seconds with the pedal off and the ignition off, that tells the PCM to go relearn this value. And then after we do that, we're going to start the engine, and we should be able to verify in our scan tool, as long as the temperature is over 170, that we've got a new top dead center offset. So if we take a look at the scan tool now, we're currently at 177, so I'm getting ready to do this. But we can scroll through and we can see what the current top dead center offset is, just to compare right there. So it's currently at minus 0.70 degrees. And if we look at our offset adjustment, it's within the valid range. So this is from the previous crankcase position sensor. So it's right, on the margin, as long as it's less than negative 0.75, and we're at negative 0.70. So hopefully this will change when we run it again. It might come up with the same value. I hope not, because then we'll never know if this actually worked, or did the relearn. But I'm hoping it comes up with a different value with a new crankcase position sensor. All right, so let's go back up and see what our current temperature is, because I want to have some margin here. All right, we're currently at 181 degrees, so I'm about ready to start this procedure. And what I want to do is go down, just so we don't have to worry about moving the camera around. I'm going to go down to the sensor for the accelerator pedal position. So you can see right now we've got the pedal off. So we're going to start this procedure now. And again, just to review, we're going to hold the pedal. We're going to turn the ignition We're going to clear the DTCs, which I've already done, and we're going to turn the engine off. So we're going to just go straight to turn the engine off. And then we're going to turn the engine on with the engine off, and we're going to hold the pedal all the way down for 45 seconds. So when I turn this off, I'm going to lose the screen on the tool, and I don't want to waste a lot of time with our seconds in doing that. So we're actually going to set the tool aside, and we're just going to use the watch. And so I'm just going to count off 45 seconds here on my watch. So I'm going to turn the AC off, and here we go. So engine off, ignition on, and then pedal to the metal for 45 seconds. So I got the pedal all the way to the ground, and I'm starting my mark at 1. Of course, this watch is probably going to go to sleep on me here in a minute, but that's okay. We'll just bring it back. We're holding it for 45 seconds. Coming up on 30 seconds. So there's 30 seconds right there. 15 more will give us 45. Still got the pedal all the way down with the ignition on. Coming up on the 10 will be our 45-second mark. It's at least 45 seconds, so we can go a little over. All right, we turned it off. And now at this point, we're marking for 30 seconds. So we've got the ignition off. We're not holding the pedal. 10 is our mark on our 30-second countdown. Coming up on the 4. And that's a mark. Start her up. Starts right up. It's another good sign. No codes. Let's see what we got for engine data. So we're still reading negative 0.70. So either that's as good as the PCM thinks it can get, or we didn't get anything out of this. So I'm hoping that's as good as it thinks it's going to get, but just to be sure, I'm probably going to run this procedure one more time. And if it gives me any kind of a different value, I'll update the video after this, but I'm going to presume that it worked. I mean, if we go back to our manual and we see that after the power down sequence and that we start the engine, as long as the temperature is over 170, then the PCM is going to automatically, as long as the RPMs are below 1500, it's going to automatically learn the new top dead center offset. So we did this procedure, and so hopefully that is what it did. Like I said, I'm going to try it one more time. If there's anything, I'll put it. All right, guys, I did this again, and it did relearn. So now we've got an offset of negative 1.85 degrees. So that's not in spec, but at least the procedure worked and it picked it up. I'm watching up here the desired injection pump timing and the actual injection pump timing, and I've taken this around for a drive, and these guys are holding pretty much the same. Sometimes, you know, like that, they'll get off by 0.1, but that seems to be within specification overall. So this is going to be fine to drive for now, but I'm going to have to revisit this and probably have to adjust the injection pump timing itself in order to get this guy back spot on before it gets cold. This is this level of offset is not going to be good when it starts getting into winter. I presume this has happened because the original negative 0.70 value was from the pump that was put in over 15 years ago, and we've just had some drift with timing chain stretch and wear on parts. This particular engine's got well over 250,000 miles on it now. So I'm going to see if I can bring it back into spec, but that'll be a different video. What I found that I did, I guess, a little bit off timing wise was on this step down here where we're holding the accelerator pedal. What I ended up doing that took it was I just kind of read this a couple of times, and I realized that what they want you to do is hold the pedal down for at least minimum, right, at least 45 seconds, and then lift it up and turn it off for 30. And so the problem was this last sentence here, which is then release the pedal. You're going to have to give it time for the PCM to recognize this. So what I ended up doing is I'd run this for 45 seconds with the pedal all the way down. then I would release the pedal, and then about 3 seconds later, then I would go on to step 8, and that seemed to trigger it and get it to relearn. So it worked just fine. It must have just been too fast the way I was doing it originally. I haven't done this particular procedure on this diesel engine before. So that's it for this video. We have successfully repaired the crankshaft position sensor, and I'll revisit the timing situation in a different video. You could drive with this negative 1.85. In fact, some people might say it's a little bit of a more performant setting for the offset anyway, but eventually I'll bring it back into factory spec. Otherwise, I consider this done. We've got no P0335 code anymore, so we definitely diagnosed it correctly. It was the crankshaft position sensor throwing that code. The symptoms I had before I did this, it was about 2 days before we did this procedure, we started to get some lurching, where the vehicle would just lurch forward about 200 or 300 RPMs, and then it threw that code. It ran for a couple more times later that day, and the code cleared. The code automatically clears after 3 successes without a fault condition. And then on the second day, we got it again, 2 back-to-back lurches, and it threw the code twice. So that's the point that I decided on the 3rd day to do the video you just see here. So if you got any comments about how you might have handled this, or maybe you've seen something with a little bit different procedure with this, go ahead and add them. If you got questions, I'll try to answer them. Go ahead and put them in the comments below. If you found that this was the kind of material you'd like to see, hit that like button so I know that you like this kind of stuff. And of course, please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. Thanks for watching.